to be here, and thank you, Jim, for your welcome here. This year is Glow's 50th anniversary. We've been spending much of the year just traveling the country and thanking God for all he's done through the work of Glow over the years. Now, for those of you who don't know Glow particularly well, the founder of Glow was this man who's now in heaven, although his widow is still alive. And he met Cynthia, his wife, or wife-to-be, when she came on an extended holiday to the UK. They met in Scotland, and having decided we're going to get married together, Colin prepared to go back down to Australia to get married and settle down to life there. But just before he went to Australia, he went to the Billy Graham Haringey Crusade, 1954, which incidentally is the crusade where my mum became a Christian. It was a really dramatic moment, and in Colin's life, he got a real vision for mass evangelism. So when he finally made his way to Australia and got married and settled down, he still had this burden just to raise people to go out on mission. And this is the first Glow team that ever was, a group of 10, mostly university students who left their homes in Sydney, and I've met several of these folk in my trips to Australia. They went to Chennai in southern India for 2.5 years, and during that time doing real mission in the raw, they managed to sell about 500,000 gospel packets, and the work of Glow still exists in India to this day. And Colin's big idea was mobilize folk for mission, train and equip them to do their job, and then send them out and try to find ways of supporting them as they go about God's work. But his insatiable desire kept driving him on, so he formed Glow in Australia. And then he went and lived in the Bay of Plenty in New Zealand for 3 or 4 years, forming Glow there. And finally, he came in the early 1970s to the UK. And the start of Glow Europe, which is based in Motherwell, was 1974. And why Motherwell? Well, only because they found an abandoned Church of Scotland building, and that was the headquarters. It was a God moment, a God thing. No one would ever think of having a headquarters in Motherwell, but that's where it is anyway. And the first European workers who began that work at Glow tried to turn the centre into what would be a real resource centre, mostly for central Scotland, but for wider afield as well, with a bookshop and a coffee shop, and that still works today. And our biggest problem at the moment is car parking. It is a nightmare because on an average week, we have about 1,000 people who will come to our centre, use the bookshop, use the coffee shop. And of those 1,000 people, more than half are non-Christians. And while we are a Christian resource centre, yet there have been dozens of folk who have come to faith in Christ through their interaction with us in the centre. We reckon over the last 50 years, about 800,000 books sold, including 80,000 Bibles. And one of the reasons why this is almost unique in that most Christian bookshops are shutting, one of the reasons is Bibles are our specialty. It's not the kind of thing you buy online. And God has blessed the work through the selling of thousands of Bibles over the years. But as well as getting the centre started, there were short-term missions, exactly what Colin tried to do in Australia. And we've been running short-term mission teams over the last 50 years. Very early days, there's an Italian team from many years ago, which took the form of a kind of a tent mission. But really anything that gets the gospel out in locations right the way across Europe. So, for example, literature distribution. Robert and Muriel Hamilton are here, and they specialised in having lots of teams and big teams every year to Naples and giving out thousands and thousands of gospels right across the city. And over the last 5 decades, it would be in certainly the millions and probably tens of millions of pieces of Christian literature that have gone out right across Europe. But literature is only part of it. Open-air preaching, which not only gets the gospel out, but helps individuals, Christians who join our teams to really do evangelism in the raw, confrontational evangelism, talking in the streets, confronting people, sharing the good news of the gospel with them. It's a great way of growing your evangelistic teeth. Children's missions, this is one that takes place every year in Norway. Nicholas and Ellen Creander are tent-making missionaries to Norway. Every year they have a Glow summer team. This is their back garden. They bring in all the neighbours from their village, all the children, and have a kids' mission. It's a tremendous way of them reaching their whole community through the kids. Luca Iliano, this young man next to the easel there, he's an artist. This is him in Hungary on a team using art. He teaches fine art for a week. And those students who come to learn about fine art, he shares the gospel with them every day in a small Bible study. So whatever we can do to get the gospel out, that's what we will do. And at the heart of it is discipleship. Because we spend some time every day on these teams, reading the Bible, praying together, talking about faith. And as a way of discipling, particularly young Christians, it's a fantastic thing. Most of our resident Glow missionaries, long-term Glow missionaries, began on a summer team. So it's a great ministry to launch out on. And again, we reckon over the last 50 years, we have done short-term mission in 29 countries across Europe, 876 locations where a team has gone, shared the gospel, and tried to talk about Jesus. And again, numbers of folk who become Christians, it would certainly be in the hundreds, and roughly 15,000 folk over the years mobilized for mission. This past summer, 100 plus people engaged in mission in 14 different locations. And part of Colin's vision was preparing folk for mission, and that means training. And again, since the very beginning in Motherwell, we used to call it the Glow Training Course. We now call it Tilsley College, but it's the same kind of idea. Usually a year, but it can bridge into a second and a third year. But the first year is the key year, where we just want to be doing discipleship. What does it mean to live Christianly in our generation? Linked with how do we think through our faith in a changing culture? And then how do we develop skills like evangelism and pastoral care that will enable Christians to be relevant in their church, in their community, as they begin to share their faith. And that training has gone on for the last 5 decades. And one thing that excites me is we have now had students from every continent in the world, bar Antarctica, coming to train with us, and now serving in every continent of the world apart from Antarctica. That's a prayer point for the future. Maybe get someone there to witness the penguins. But at the absolute heart of what we do is the long-term mission, because while a short-term team can get the gospel out and do evangelism, if you want to plant churches, and Europe desperately needs churches, it's a lifelong commitment. It takes 15 years, 20 years, 25 years to plant a church. And that means missionaries giving their lives. And the sacrifice in Europe is immense. It really is immense, because it's a tough place to work. And I can only give you a snapshot of some of the situations we have across Europe. On the Glow stand over there, there's a free book called The Story of Glow, much more detail there. There's also another free book called Europe at a Spiritual Crossroads, which will let you see just how dark a place Europe really is. This is one of the darkest corners of the world. But a very, very quick snapshot, just in the short time that I have remaining. Albania, which 25 years ago was a closed country, one of the most closed, impenetrable communist countries in the world, now it's alive. I preached at a conference of church leaders 18 months ago. 140 church leaders right across Albania, and I was just about the oldest person there. It was remarkable to see how God has grown the work. And we've got 2 couples who work in Vlora, which is the second city of Albania. It's right down there in the south. And they planted a church and now have a building, which is a kind of a center for reaching out to the rest of the city. And the plan is to divide the city up into different sections, and over the next maybe decade or 2 decades, to have another church plant, another one, to cover every quarter of that city of it's about the size of Edinburgh, and deeply needed. Their biggest problem, by the way, is the brain drain. Their church now numbers about 70 in fellowship, but if everyone who had become a Christian to their work were to come back, it would number about 350 to 400. They lose key leaders every year because they go to places like Germany to just find work, because Albania has a desperate economy, but their work is growing, and it's incredibly exciting what God is doing. France, Mike Packer's here. He was part of a generation of folk who went to Marseille. We've got global work in various parts of France, but Marseille is I guess, the epicenter. And those early pioneer missionaries in the early days of Marseille, it was tough. It was dangerous as well, but brutally tough. And they managed to plant some small churches. And we're now in the third generation with a church called Le Cep. I did the church weekend for the church in Le Cep. Just in January, there are 180 of us up to the hills to a campsite for 3 days of intensive Bible study in the book of Acts, which I was leading, and discussing church strategy. Now, the couple top right there, Philippe and Marie-Christine, they were our first national workers in Glow, and they were the folk who were part of the team that planted Le Cep. And having done that church plant, they then went to Aix-en-Provence, 40 minutes away, another university city, not just to plant another church, but to have a church planting training area. And one of the couples that came to work with them in Aix have gone another half an hour down the road to a town called Salon-de-Provence. And they've planted a church there as well. As far as we know, it's the first ever evangelical church in Salon in its history. And back in Marseille, Le Cep continues to grow. They opened a cafe in the very center of the city. And just this week, they're having a special event. There'll be an art exhibition in the cafe with paintings on all kinds of natural art. And in the evening, lectures on the God of creation. So the cafe is a real outreach centre in the city centre, and they've also gone to the northeastern suburbs, to Aubagne, and they've just begun a new church plant there, which now, just since August, is meeting once a month on a Sunday, but it will be a strong, independent, God willing, church in the future. The south east of France is blossoming as God works. Over in Hungary, dark country, this couple, Robert and Emishe. They're in a city called Eger. It's a big university city. I've taken many summer teams to work with them, and they're trying, through their small church of about 25 people, reach out to this city of about 160,000 people. They also run the main Christian book publishing ministry in Hungary. So a lot of work for a young couple with huge responsibility. Italy, we've got the Goodisons here. Heidi's here. Robert and Muriel are here. The greater Naples area, there's been church planting going on for 30 plus years. The Goodisons are further down south. Italy is a tough place. Culturally very difficult to live there, let alone share the gospel. But God is blessed. And talk to Heidi sometime, talk to Robert and Muriel, and ask, what has God been doing there? Because churches have been planted, and we thank God for the tremendous work that's taken place there over the years. And further afield, just not too far, a couple of hours, 2.5 hours drive from here, Enniscorthy. A couple from Airdrie with Andrew's sister, Mags, left Airdrie, which is about 10 minutes from where I live in Scotland, went to Enniscorthy, again, a tough area. Their second year in the town, that year they had 14 suicides in the town. It was a time of real economic struggle. They've planted a church, and it is full of young people and thriving. And I thank God for their commitment over many, many years at doing church planting in the Republic, which is, again, a tough place to be. Romania, I couldn't even begin to talk about what God has been doing in Romania. It's alive with work. And the Glow folk who are there do a whole range of stuff. We've got a bookshop there and a mobile bookshop traveling around the country. George and Lydia in the middle here got a burden for working with gypsies, who are one of the most ostracized communities in Romania. And they've been involved in the planting of about 5 churches amongst the gypsies, and now training and discipling gypsies, along with their son and daughter-in-law, who are working particularly with the young gypsy folk. And the couple bottom left, children's ministries, which not only touches Romanian kids in Romania, but because they've now gone online thanks to the pandemic, their radio ministry, which is the Romanian diaspora, they have Sunday school classes online in the UK with Romanian kids, and the news they get month after month of young children, Romanian children, coming to faith in Christ from right across the Romanian diaspora, it would absolutely melt your heart. It's so exciting to see what God has been doing. Romania is alive and growing. And even as we speak, this couple are in the process of joining Glow. That guy on the right, Bostjan, about 15 years ago, he was homeless and a drug addict. And God saved him. He's now leading a church along with his wife, Lydia. He's Slovenian. She's Croatian. And in Maribor, which is the second city of Slovenia, it's a tough place to be. 90% of evangelicals in Slovenia live in the capital. So outside the capital, there's so little. Maribor, which is a bigger town than Lisbon with a university, 3 churches. Theirs has about 30 in fellowship. It's one of the mega churches in Maribor. It's a tough place to be. They're joining us. And they know the Balkans well, which, as David will tell you, is one of the most complex and difficult regions in Europe. And we're delighted to have them joining us and working with us as we try to reach out to the Balkans, which is one of those great frontiers. So that's the Glow family. We just thank God for 50 years in which God has blessed, despite all of our significant weakness. And somebody asked me about 3 months ago when I was telling them about traveling around the country, talking about what God has been doing over the last 50 years. And they said, well, is Glow's work almost finished after 5 decades? And my answer, absolutely not. We've hardly begun. Honestly, we've hardly begun. And that's because Europe today is far more needy than it was in 1974. Far more needy. To begin with, Europe is growing. Compared to 1974, the population of Europe has grown by 75 million. Within Europe itself, we are being torn apart by culture wars. You're aware of the culture wars. On the one side, the woke left. On the other side, radical Islam, and everything in between. Europe is one of the most divided and fractious parts of the world. And that fractiousness is getting worse, not getting any better. And you know, you watch the news, you know the challenges that are out there. And trying to go into this difficult Europe and share Jesus to a broken society, that's a massive challenge. And then secularism is entrenched and becoming more entrenched. Institutional Christianity is effectively dead in Europe. And actually, that's not a bad thing. Because what folk don't need is institutional Christianity. What they do need is Jesus. So the sooner institutional Christianity dies altogether, the better. Because what people need is Christ and nothing more. So, but it's still a challenge that we face. And think about the moral confusion. I have non-Christian friends of mine who come to talk to me about ethical issues because they say, we no longer know what to teach our kids. The schools don't know what to teach our kids. The government doesn't know what to teach our kids. There's just this morass of confusion and mess. And one of my neighbors who's a Buddhist said to me, the person I really respect is Kate Forbes. Now, those of you who know anything about Scottish politics, she was an evangelical Christian who tried to stand for the leadership of our main party in Scotland. And she got crucified. Why? She stood up for her Christian faith. And he said, I love that woman because she's got a moral compass and she knows where she's going. Now, he's a Buddhist, but recognizes that. Europe is in a terrible, confusing mess, and some of the most unreached parts of our planet are in Europe. If you went to Slovenia today and then went to Saudi Arabia afterwards, you would have more chance of bumping into an evangelical Christian in Saudi Arabia than you would in Slovenia. And the same would be true of Kosovo, or Montenegro, or North Macedonia. Europe has some of the most unreached places on earth. So our work has only just begun. Please pray that the next 50 years will be even more profitable.